Well, welcome everybody. Once a week, I always try to do what I call weekly immigration updates, just what's going on in immigration. Especially, I started this last year because, or maybe like 2 years ago, because immigration is constantly changing. So I would do every now and then, at least once or twice a month. But now I probably do it at least weekly because something happens weekly. So I'm so excited today to have with me our new attorney, Marleni Sanchez. Marleni is starting with us. Marleni is in Texas. So that is wonderful for us because we have a lot of clients in Texas. And sometimes with the courts right now in Texas, it's a little bit difficult. They're not always wanting the attorney to appear via WebEx, where even though most of the United States does allow that, some of the judges in Texas are saying, no, you need to have an attorney with you. So that's really great news for us because we have attorney Marleni Sanchez. And Marleni has a background where she has experience in asylum and also benefits type of cases. So adjustment of status, VAWA, U visas, those type of cases. And of course, she's bilingual, super smart, super intelligent, barred I think barred in Texas, right? Or are you barred in Missouri? Okay, barred in Missouri. But with immigration, you can work in the whole United States as long as you are barred in one state, because we're talking about the federal level. So Marleni, thank you so much for being with us here today for our weekly updates. We're doing it in English. Last week we did Spanish, but I also feel like there's a lot of people that need to hear the same type of information we're giving in English. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Marleni.
Thank you for having me, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to work for someone that truly cares about the immigrant population and the struggles that immigrants go through. You are the best.
Thank you. I did not pay her to say this, I promise.
She really is an angel. She really is.
So I'm so happy to have you here with us because some of the news this week actually affects Texas specifically. So it's good that you can be here with us and talk about what's going on in the world of immigration. So I think the biggest news that kind of rocked the world in immigration is something that happened on Friday, right? And that is the big case that was happening where I have so many clients that their cases were stalled. Their cases were basically stopped. And it was basically the Trump administration putting a big pause on 39 countries. And these 39 countries, they just were not processing their paperwork. They weren't processing their work permits. They weren't processing their adjustment of status. They weren't processing their marriage interviews. I personally had this happen to me where I was in a marriage interview about to go in, and the officer came out and said, I'm sorry, we can't conduct the interview because we just got this order from above saying that we can no longer process people from one of these 39 countries. So, and it was affecting a lot of stuff. I heard there were even people that were getting their swearing in ceremony, getting their naturalization, and they were literally pulled out of the ceremony saying, no, everything's on pause for people from these countries. So you want to talk about what the judge said on Friday, Marleni? It was so cool.
Yeah, sure. I think the court's concern was that USCIS cannot just put people in indefinite limbo without a legal basis and without an explanation. And so that doesn't mean that every case is automatically approved. It means the government can't unlawfully refuse to process or decide cases just because someone is from a particular country. And I think for our clients and all our followers out there, right, the takeaway is if your case was delayed, paused, or affected because of your country or nationality, this may be important, but you still need an attorney to look at your specific case.
Exactly. It doesn't automatically mean like, okay, you had an asylum case, now your case is going to get approved. But there was like a pause. And like I had one client that I went to his interview. He had an extremely good case, wonderful case, a lot of evidence. And I said to him, I don't see how this case doesn't get approved. Like you can never guarantee because each officer is different. But he had such a good case. And I can say each officer is different because I remember this case where I had a brother and a sister. We went to the same asylum office, exact same story. They both were Venezuelan and they had two different officers, and the sister's case got approved and the brother's case got referred to court. So that shows you how much the officers have discretion. And, a lot of it depends on how you respond. I felt like the sister was a little bit more responsive than the brother, so that might have helped. But it really is like basically the cases were the same. So it's really depends on your case, but at least you don't have this pause. And it's such like an arbitrary pause. There's really no rhyme or reason for it. Well, you're from these 39 countries, so we're going to pause. So I'm really happy about that. A lot of my clients, at least they might get their responses. Some people might get their work permits, because even work permits were paused. So I'm excited about that case.
So Diane, if someone believes their case was affected by this freeze, what should they do first?
Well, I would check my USCIS account, because this was mainly geared at USCIS. So, a couple years ago, USCIS started implementing this account where you could create your account online and you can check what's going on in your case. Now, there's good things and bad things about that. The good thing is that it might be easier for you to log in and check and see what's going on in your case. But I have clients that filed asylum like 7-8 years ago. And even though they have their My USCIS account, they can see their new stuff. Like they might be able to see their work permit. They might be able to see their TPS if they had a TPS. But the asylum application, they don't have access to it because it was done before they started implementing that. Sometimes there's a way where you can write USCIS and ask them if they can connect your USCIS account to the paper document. Sometimes they'll do it, sometimes they won't. I had a case where we did that and they actually did upload the old application, but they don't always do that. So that's first thing, check your account. The other thing is, check the case status, because when you go to USCIS, there's something called case status, USCIS, and maybe it'll say like your case is being processed or your work permit is being printed. So that's the type of things that I think you should definitely do. It doesn't necessarily mean that the case is going to be approved. That's still at the discretion, but at least it's not on pause, So I think that's a good idea for them. Check that USCIS account. So, and before I move on to the next subject, super important to be careful, because one of the things that we're seeing is that people are getting notified of asylum interviews and they're supposed to get a paper document, or getting notified of biometric appointments, and they should be getting a paper document saying, hey, you have your biometric appointment. I've had clients where they never got the actual document, but it appears on their USCIS portal. And if you're not one of those people who's constantly checking the portal, you miss your fingerprint appointment and then you can't get your work permit. So I feel like that's a little shady, because really, like, you should, even though you have a USCIS account, that doesn't mean that USCIS doesn't have a duty, I think, to notify you and send you a paper document. But what they're saying is that, we did notify you because we put it on your USCIS account. So if you're not one of those people that are constantly checking that account, you could easily slip and miss like a biometrics appointment, or miss like an asylum interview, or miss your marriage interview. So I think it's super important to check the USCIS portal if you have one. Definitely.
Like a religiously.
Yes, 100%. Okay, let's see. More news happening. So that's good news. There's good news and there's bad news.
Yes.
Well, I like to focus on the good news, but we do have a little bit of bad news. So there was that memo that went out last week. And this is, to me, and I'm an immigration attorney, I still find this confusing. So on one side, there was a policy memo saying that they were going to force people to have their interviews outside of the United States. But then they kind of walked it back a little bit. And I'm not fully clear on what is the status of it right now. So can you talk about that memo a little bit and what was going on with that? It just like all our clients were stressing out about it.
Sure. I think what's really causing concern is that USCIS or USCIS is emphasizing that adjustment of status is discretionary. In other words, even if someone meets basic eligibility requirements, USCIS is saying approval is not automatic. And this is where clients need to be very careful. Some people may be told they need to consular process abroad, but leaving the United States can be extremely risky for certain people. If someone has unlawful presence, prior removal orders, fraud issues, criminal history, or if they entered without inspection, leaving the country may trigger serious immigration bars. I think so. The safest public advice is do not leave the United States to try to finish a green card case without first speaking to your immigration attorney.
That's so true, because I spoke to somebody this week that they did their paperwork by themselves without an immigration attorney. And they had the similar situation because they said, well, their spouse was a legal permanent resident. And they said, well, my spouse is a legal permanent resident. I entered legally. I should be able to adjust status. True. But if your spouse is a legal permanent resident and not a U.S. citizen, if there was any moment where you fell out of status and you accumulated unlawful presence, they could tell you, well, we're not going to approve your adjustment of status in the United States because at one point you fell out of status. So in that case, she may be forced to go back to her country and wait for her interview in her country. The problem is sometimes if you've accumulated unlawful presence, depending on how much you've accumulated, you may get a bar. So the law says if you've accumulated more than 6 months of out of status, if you leave the country, you get a 3-year bar where you can't come back. And if you've accumulated more than 1 year, you can get a 10-year bar. 10 years where you can't come back to the United States. So this is the type of case that, you may want to talk to an attorney to get a waiver. There's a waiver of unlawful presence. But in other words, I think if, like I said to her, I said, if you had spoken to me, because her husband now is doing his naturalization, I probably would have said, wait until your husband gets his naturalization and then file the paperwork. But, people think like, well, it's just some forms to fill out. I can do it.
They don't realize that green card strategy is very fact specific. You can't assume that because a family member adjusted status, you can too. Your entry history, your immigration history, and criminal history matter.
100%. The criminal is such a big thing. I tell my clients, I'm like, if you are an immigrant, you need to be an angel. Like you need to walk around like an angel, because this applies to like crimmigration, which is a whole other field. But a big mistake that people make is that they'll have an immigration case and they'll get like some minor thing, and then they go to an immigration attorney who doesn't know anything about immigration. They go to a criminal attorney who doesn't know anything about immigration, and the criminal attorney will say, just accept the plea bargain. Don't worry about it. Just accept the charges, declare yourself guilty. It'll be fine because it's something so minor. But even something minor, if you're an immigrant, can affect your status. If you're on a student visa, you could lose your student visa. If you're on a work visa, you can lose your work visa. Even if you're here and you're applying for a green card, that's going to be flagged like, oh, he got arrested for this. Or even years, you could be doing your naturalization years down the road, and it'll come up that you had this criminal issue. So sometimes it's better to try to fight it out in court and see if you can get the charges dismissed, especially if you know that you're innocent. Like I had a client that he got stopped by the police for driving without a seatbelt. He was in the passenger seat. He wasn't even driving. The driver didn't have his seatbelt. He had his seatbelt, but because he didn't want to argue with the officer, he just accepted the ticket. He didn't fight it. He said, I'll just pay the ticket because I don't want to have problems because I'm an immigrant. But now it's coming up on his immigration paperwork that he had like, oh, this traffic violation. And, we know about the Laken Riley Act. So
Yep.
Laken Riley Act is killing me. I understand. Don't come at me in the comments. I know the Laken Riley Act. I'm not saying that what happened to the young lady, but I remember even the parents of the young lady who was killed, he came out and said that he did not like the fact that they were using his daughter's death as a political like football. Basically, they were creating this whole thing around immigration around his daughter's death, and he did not approve of that. But basically, under the Laken Riley Act, the law changed so that if you're an immigrant and let's say you get arrested for something that it could be a minor traffic violation, normally you wouldn't get called, like ICE wouldn't be called to come and get you unless you get convicted of a crime. So if it's a traffic thing, if it's something minor and you get the charges dropped, then it doesn't automatically mean that ICE is going to come get you. But with the Laken Riley Act, now for minor things like driving without a seatbelt, they can basically arrest you and call ICE, and then you're now getting deported for something that you weren't even driving. You were just a passenger in the car.
Yeah.
So this is what's happening. That happened to my client. He ended up they took him to a detention center because he was a passenger in a car. So things like that are happening, and I don't know what the solution is, but I know there's got to be a middle ground, because right now we're going to the extreme where, and studies have shown the vast majority of people that are getting deported are not criminals, the vast majority. But this was like a pretext to now just grab everybody off the street.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
well, speaking of detention centers, there's a lot of ICE detention centers under scrutiny right now.
Yes. Let's talk about that, and especially in Texas.
Yes. Oh my. Texas always is the center of attention when it comes to these kinds of issues. Yeah, I've seen that another major topic this week is, detention center conditions. I think we're seeing official reports and lawsuits raising concerns about overcrowding, medical neglect, food, hygiene, and use of force in the ICE detention centers. Diane, what's the first thing a family, should do if someone is detained and taken to one of these ICE detention centers?
The first thing they should do, I would say, is try to get an attorney and see if you can get a bond, if he qualifies for a bond. So that varies, based on the situation. There was that case. Well, first of all, technically, if the person entered with a visa, they should qualify for a bond if they entered with a visa. That's basically right now where we are, unless they're considered an arriving alien. So if they came with humanitarian parole, if they, let's say, entered with CBP-1, a lot of times the ICE officers will categorize them as an arriving alien. What that does is it places you as if you're still at the border, you're still at the airport. So therefore, only the ICE officers have the discretion to release you. So that's really difficult when you have someone who entered as an arriving alien. So all those people who entered under the humanitarian parole and entered through the border, if you got to check and see through your paperwork, does it say that you're an arriving alien? In that case, you probably won't qualify for a bond, and you're better off going for habeas corpus. And habeas corpus is basically you go above the immigration judge and you're going to the federal district court, and you can make an argument saying that you're being detained, unlawfully or for a prolonged period of time, or that the arrest was maybe illegal. And then the federal district judge is looking at not the immigration situation, they're looking at the 4th and 5th Amendment of the Constitution. So that's what's helping, because thank God in the 4th and 5th Amendment of the Constitution, it doesn't say anything about whether you're an immigrant or not. It says anyone in the United States, in our territory under this jurisdiction. 4th Amendment is search and seizures. So that means if you have an illegal arrest, you could get released under habeas corpus. 5th Amendment is due process. So if the way that they detained you, let's say they didn't follow the process that they were supposed to follow, then you might be able to get released under habeas corpus. So that's the first thing I would do. The big thing I know in Texas, it's rough because they had that case matter of Yahure last year that basically said anybody who came through the border does not qualify for bond. We don't care. And this case has been basically there's a fight going on throughout the United States. 2nd District, which is New York, they came out they said that they don't agree with that if you came through the border, because this was always the law before this Yahure Hurtado case. If you came through the border, you still were eligible for a bond. This thing about, no, you're not eligible for bond just because you came through the border, that's something new. 11th Circuit also came out and kind of sided with New York, which is a shock because 11th Circuit is Georgia and Florida and I think Alabama. So they're usually very strict about this, but I guess they're looking at it from a 4th and 5th Amendment perspective, keeping people detained indefinitely is really going against the Constitution. Now, Texas is a different thing. This is still kind of being debated in Texas. So there was a big case in Texas called Buen Rostro, and that kind of, I think it went up to the 5th Circuit, and the 5th Circuit sided with Yahure, but it's still kind of being debated. I don't know the full story there, but Buen Rostro is a big thing. So Yahure Hurtado, I wouldn't say that in Texas we can definitely get a bond. I would go for habeas corpus, but but if you're talking about different parts of the country, is different. California is also usually a little more favorable, especially Central District of California. But it really depends, and that's why each case is so different. And that's why you probably do need a lawyer. And I'm not saying this because I'm a lawyer. We are not saying this because we're lawyers, I promise.
But it does matter, you know. It matters because when someone's detained, their immigration case does not stop, you know.
Yes.
They still have rights, they still have defenses, and in some cases, they may still, like you said, be eligible for bond or release. And so it's important for families to gather information quickly if a loved one is detained, their full name, the A number, date of birth, where they were detained, and whether they have medical conditions and whether they have upcoming court dates as well.
And what you just said is so true, Marleni. Your case doesn't stop. On the contrary, it kind of accelerates, because now you could have been detained and maybe your court date was like in a year or two. But because you're detained now, they're transferring your case from the non-detained location or non-detained docket to a detention center. And what happens when they do that is that you're in the detention center. They cannot keep people detained indefinitely for no reason. So what do? They end up like making the case go much faster. So now you're talking about maybe a case that was going to take a year to now your case is like 3 to 6 months. Like you might get your final hearing in a month or two, maximum 3 months, maximum 6 months, but then your case is done. And if you can't get the person out of the detention center, or if they don't win their case and they don't have enough time to prepare their case, they're way more likely to be deported. It's like it accelerates the case. So it doesn't mean it's kind of like you have to run two parallel cases, like on one side trying to maybe fight to the detention or trying to get them out, and on the other side still continue with their asylum case. So
makes everything so much more urgent.
Yeah. It is way crazier.
And you know, Texas keeps, I mean, being in the spotlight. Did you hear that another, I guess, neutral piece of news is that there's a new San Antonio asylum office.
Oh, wow. Well,
yeah.
That is awesome. Because Texas, you know, they only had the Houston asylum office, but Texas is in charge of a lot of other states that don't have asylum offices. Like we have a lot of clients in Utah and they go to the Houston asylum office. I have clients in Colorado and they also go to the asylum office. So that office is in charge of, I don't know how many states, but I know it's like Utah, Colorado, Texas, and I think maybe even New Mexico. There's a bunch of states where anyone who lives in those states have to go down to Texas. So now you said, where did you say the location is going to be for the new office?
San Antonio. So USCIS announced that beginning May 28th of this year, asylum applicants under the Houston Asylum Office jurisdiction, they can be interviewed either in Houston or in San Antonio.
Well, what that's going to do is maybe accelerate some cases, because I know people in Houston that have been waiting 10 years for an asylum interview because the office is so behind. But now if they open this second location, definitely is going to move things up a little bit. I would be interested to see, like, where are they considering, who's going where, because they did the same thing like maybe 2 years ago in Florida, where they opened a second asylum office in Florida, because Florida has like 25% of all the asylum cases in the whole United States, because we have a lot of immigrants in Florida. So they opened a second office in Tampa, and then they still kept the Miami office, but Miami was just like Houston, like 10 years for an asylum interview. But what they did in Florida is that they kind of divided the state. So if you are from like maybe the middle of the state to the north, like all the way to Tallahassee, Pensacola, Jacksonville, all those people go to the Tampa office. And then if you are from maybe like Orlando down to Miami and the Florida Keys, you go to Miami. So I would like to know, like, I wonder how they're dividing that. Are they going to do something like this, where, okay, if you're from this state, you go to the satellite office in San Antonio, and if you're from another state, you go to Houston, or is it just going to be like divided? So that would be interesting to know.
That would be interesting to see how they divide that up. I do know that for clients, I think they need to read every USCIS notice carefully. You can't just assume that your interview will be in Houston, because if you live in the Houston jurisdiction, even though you live in this jurisdiction, means you could still, have your interview in San Antonio. So it
Yes.
will be interesting to see which ones fall under there. And
Yeah. And one thing I want to like say to clients, which this happens to us a lot, clients look for a lawyer at the last minute. Because when you the asylum office doesn't give you that much time. Usually the max you're going to get is 2 months. Like usually when they send you the notice, you have like your interviews in 30 days, maybe 6 weeks. Max I've seen is 2 months, but they don't give more than 2 months. They'll say like, okay, you have your interview, and now people are scrambling looking for a lawyer, trying to redo their applications, because I've had so many clients that filed their application years ago, and the applications, they just never touched them, so they haven't updated the application. There's a lot of stuff they haven't they have forgotten, they haven't added new country conditions that they can be adding to their case, and just like fear of future persecution. Like I've had situations where clients have left their country, but after they left, something happened. Like somebody will go to their house looking for them, somebody will like send messages to their family, and that's stuff that can be still included in your application as a form of persecution, because that shows that whoever was after you is still after you. So updating your application is just so important, and it's not good to wait till the last minute.
And what would you say to clients who, if someone receives an interview notice and they feel unprepared?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say first and foremost, that's when you really need a lawyer, because the lawyer is not just gonna be like to redo the application. Like ideally, what I would do is redo your whole application, look at it, see, is it good, is it bad, see if I can improve it. But in addition to that, there's also the question of preparing for the interview, because people go to the interview and they're so like stressed out, they forget things. So I like to do like several prep sessions before the interview with the person, like going over their story, and making sure that they know their story well, because it's not necessarily that they're lying, it's just sometimes people forget, and sometimes people block out traumatic things too. Like I've had clients that will say to me like, oh, like they bring up things that they said, I don't know why, abogada, when I'm talking to you, I bring up this other stuff, because there's things that they blocked out. Like, well, I didn't want to think about that when, I was in the hospital and I got attacked in my country. And then as they're talking, this type of thing starts coming out. So when you get to that interview, you gotta like know your stuff. You can't be sitting there like, I think it was on this date, I think it was on that date, because what it looks like to the officer is that maybe you're lying, maybe you're making up your whole story. So I tell the client, I'm like, I need you to know your story, like boom, boom, boom. When they ask you, when did this happen? This happened on this date, this happened on that day. You can't be sitting there thinking, because then they're saying, like, maybe how can you not know your story? Maybe you're just making this up. And unfortunately, there are people that do make their stories up. There are people that is like a complete lie, completely fake story. So the officers kind of go in with that lens of, well, how do I know you're telling the truth? Mm-hmm. So, and that's why the evidence is so important, because if you show up with a ton of evidence, then they're thinking, okay, maybe this guy's not lying. Maybe he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the more detailed and the more.
Mm-hmm. The more detail, the better. Mm-hmm. So I know it sounds bad because we're lawyers, so people might say, oh, you're just saying that because you're a lawyer. No, but really, like, you need a lawyer now. This is not the time to go into the interview like unprepared, because they will send you to the court. They will send you to court. And also like interpreters. I went to an interview in Tampa, and the client went and she needed an interpreter, and she didn't go with an interpreter. And they said immediately, we're sending you to court. And she started crying. She said, but no, like I want to do my interview, but she didn't bring an interpreter. And they tell you have to bring an interpreter, because you can't assume that the officer you get speaks Spanish, or speaks whatever your native language is. So you have to go with an interpreter, and people think like they're just going to go and like, oh, I'm just going to see what happens. No,
bad idea. No, an interpreter makes everything flow so much more smoothly. I went to a USCIS interview once where the interpreter was amazing, and I don't think we could have done it without him. He ended up being from the same region as the client, the same country. And so they spoke kind of like the same dialect, had the same accent, and it just made things flow, seamlessly. So yeah, being prepared, you can't beat being prepared for these. I mean, there's a lot riding on it, so. clients definitely need to find an attorney not a week or 2 weeks before your hearing. But how much, what would you say if a client said, well, how much time do I need, to prepare for an asylum interview?
Ideally, I would say 6 months. Because but at least like 2 months. Like if you get your letter, get an attorney immediately, start preparing with that, because the attorney is going to need like a good couple of sessions with you. I would say like maybe like probably 3-4 sessions with the client before, and then to redo the application, because sometimes you look at these applications, man, and they're just like a thin little piece of paper with no evidence at all. And and the new thing that they're doing is about the signature. I don't know if you saw that, but I don't know if this applies to USCIS, but I know with the court they're starting to say that they want a wet signature, so they don't want to accept
Electronic PDF.
Yeah, if it's on for court, I know that they're doing this, and specifically not so much on the statement, but on the I-589. Like they want you to sign everything in paper, and that's gonna make it a little more difficult for the attorneys, because now we gotta have the client come in, or we have to mail it to the client. But they are being like picky, and the reason is they just want to give us all a hard time.
Yep.
They want to keep giving us a hard time and make it stuff harder. So,
as if the I-589s weren't already hard enough, I had a client the other day who had his I-589 prepared by what he thought was a paralegal, and upon revision, it was, completely wrong. Not even not his story at all. So, yeah.
And I try to tell them, I'm like, sometimes it's worth it to just pay somebody, because they say, well, my cousin did it for me and he said he knew how to fill it out, and then now where it's ready to go to court, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm gonna have to redo this whole thing. So it's hard for an attorney, because also it's our license on the line, so we don't want to go to court with something that's not well done. So that's another reason why I like to redo the statement, because I'm looking at it like, I don't want to show my face in front of the judge with this like flimsy application.
We're the ones who are going to get yelled at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. The judge is going to yell at the attorney. They don't care. They're going to be like, you brought this to court, you knew this was a mess, like what happened here? So especially when you're dealing with like judges that from different districts, you never know what you're going to get, because we do have clients all over the country, so it depends on the district. Some judges are stricter, some judges are more laid back, but especially like, for example, Texas, if you have like some of the southern states, the judges might be a little more strict, and then some other areas they're more laid back, so you really don't know. So what I try to do is just from the get-go, just do a good job, because you can't do a good job from the beginning, but when the client comes at the last minute, it's like, it's hard. But I'm happy that at least I'm trying to get the word out there to tell clients this, like, please look for a lawyer before you have your court date, because especially now with this administration, they are not giving a lot of chances. They are not like before. You could go to court one time and then maybe you didn't have an attorney, and you might go a second time and not have an attorney. This time, if you go a first time and you don't have an attorney, the judge might give you one chance. It said, you need to come back with your application ready, with your forms ready. You better come back with an attorney. And if you don't, that's it. They're not giving second and third chances anymore. So, it's much harder now.
Yeah.
And, I try to tell people, but sometimes they're like, well, I said, and I do payment plans. This is exactly why I do payment plans, because I don't want people to say like, I don't want to do my status. I don't want to fix my status because of money, because fixing your status is super important. So if it's a question of money, I'll be like, okay, let's do a payment plan. Let's see what we can work out. And then, we're going to be together for a while, because the case is not going to be done in usually the cases take a while to be finished. So I'm like, okay, let's work on something, but to not do your paperwork because you're like, well, it's because of money. And then next thing you know, it's much worse, because then you end up with an order of deportation, especially something that could have been avoided. That's really hard and heartbreaking, because sometimes when they come to me at that point, there's not much I can do.
Yeah. And see, you're an angel. I said it to start with, prime example.
Oh,
but oh man. Well, What about, do we have anything on visas?
Yes. Well,
Everybody
the
loves to
thing,
talk about visas.
yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is with the work visas, employment visas. um uh, People were really happy because it seems like under the visa bulletin, the work visas, at least the EB2s and EB3s, those categories that have to do more with employment visas, were going pretty fast, but it seems like they went back again. So that is something that goes up and down. So there was a big one with India. There was that India did, basically there was it retrogress. So basically went back, I think, 10 months. So people were so happy because if people don't understand what the visa bulletin is, the visa bulletin basically is, if you check the Department of State website, and it talks about how many visas are given for the whole world. So sometimes people have a waiting period. You could get approved, but maybe there's not enough visas. So, and it also applies to family petitions as well. But a lot of people were happy because at least the employment ones were moving. So when you have people that are companies and they want to bring people that are highly educated that can come and work in the United States, and I know people say, well, oh, these people are taking jobs. Really, they're not, because we're talking about people that have like probably PhDs and like advanced degrees, especially with this category, the EB2s and the EB1s. These are like top of their field that are coming to the United States. So it's not really, it's probably more like a lack of jobs. I mean, a lack of people in the United States that can do these type of jobs, because we're talking about these advanced degrees, or jobs like nursing. Like nurses are constantly in demand, and we don't have enough nurses here in the United
Not
States.
enough, yeah.
Not enough. So there's always jobs and always employment for people in those categories. But we did see that slowed down, and some people were excited about that because they said, well, maybe at least that will be the one good thing that comes out of this administration. Let me not get in trouble. But anyway, but that's not it. No, it's not working. It was a limited period of time. The other big thing that happened this week that I don't think we talked about last week was the H-1B, the $100,000 fee for the H-1B. Speaking of employment visas.
Yeah.
I forgot. We didn't talk about that last week because I think that also came out either Monday or it was like over the weekend. Stuff always happens over the weekend. But basically, speaking of employment type of visas, this administration had put a fee on H-1B visas, which are kind of like temporary employment visas. You can get approved for like up to 3 years to work for a company. A lot of people do these H-1Bs and then they can stay here for up to 3 years and even change companies and apply again. But there's a lottery system. There's a whole lottery system. And eventually a lot of people do end up getting their green cards if they're highly educated and they get a company that wants to do a labor certification. So the big thing is, in the beginning of this year, I think it was the beginning of this year or late last year, this administration implemented a fee of $100,000. $100,000.
Wow.
So, and that for you to get this, I had a friend who had gotten his H-1B approved, but he was just lucky because he got it approved before they started implementing this $100,000. So he didn't have to pay that. But thank God, I think it was Monday, a federal judge said that you can't just randomly decide to put a fee on people. Like, it's kind of like there's no rhyme or reason. Like, oh, we're going to put this fee on these H-1Bs and, just because we feel like it. And a lot of companies were upset because some companies had employees that were ready to come to the United States that had already gotten approved. And now they increase this fee to $100,000. Now, like I said, some people say it's because they want to help the American worker. I 100% agree, but what I think they should do to help the American worker is give free college. How about free community college? How about free vocational school? How about that? So, so companies don't have to look for people abroad.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. No, and I think this whole visa thing, I don't know if you heard, but there was a lot of commotion in a small town here in Texas outside of Dallas, Frisco, because a lot of people were upset that people from India were using the H-1, visas, and essentially kind of taking over the town is what people
Yeah.
were saying,
Mhm.
and so it was, you had people arguing on one side,
Mhm.
saying that they were committing immigration fraud, because they
Mhm.
were just using them, to come here and eventually, get their green cards. And other people on the other side saying, well, I think this is more about, people having a problem with race than it is,
Mhm.
the immigration fraud.
Mhm.
So there was a lot going on. So I wonder now that they've removed this,
Yeah.
$100,000 fee,
Mhm.
if it'll cause even more talk, in that
Yeah.
town.
I think people don't understand like how difficult it is to get a work visa to come to the United States. It's not
Mhm.
easy. Like usually the Department of Labor, their job is really like to protect the American worker. So they screen. So it usually has to be like, for example, for a labor certification where you can eventually get a green card through your company, you have to show that you're doing a type of job that either there's not enough American workers who want to do this type of job, or not enough
Mhm.
American workers who can do this type of job. So you have a situation, for example, there's a lot of agricultural workers that get the H-2B, the
Yes.
was it the H-2A? I think there's it. So there's one that's
Mhm.
agriculture. I think it's the H-2A, and the H-2A visa is for agricultural workers who come here like 8-9 months out of the year. They work agricultural jobs and then they go back. But
Mhm.
they help a lot of companies here. A lot of companies rely on them because a lot of those jobs are really tough jobs that most people do
Mhm.
not want to do, because it's just long hours, grueling work, not great work conditions. And people come here from other countries to get that benefit. So, and it actually helps the economy because the food and industry and everything. So there's good and bad in it. I think that H-1B's got a bad rap because now it's like a talking point where they're like, oh, H-1Bs are stealing our jobs. But the H-1B is actually the category of educated people. So we're not talking about people that are maybe doing jobs that nobody wants to do. These are
Yeah,
probably
not like
jobs
the
that there's
migrant
not
workers.
enough people that have the capability of doing these
Qualified.
jobs,
Yeah,
that are
they're not
qualified.
qualified. Yeah.
They're not qualified. They're
Mhm.
not as enough, maybe like top tech STEM people in the United
Mhm.
States that can do this type of
Computer
work.
engineers, software
Yeah,
engineers, yeah.
yeah. So I'm
Mhm.
100% for keeping American jobs, but let's also give Americans the tools to get
Mhm.
those jobs. Like, like I said, there's so many things that we can do. Like in Europe, there's a lot of places that give free college in many countries in Europe, and I don't think that that's something that's totally out of reach in the United States. And maybe if we get to that point, people won't use immigration as this political football that they use right now, and people can actually like see like, okay, because we have the capability, I do believe that, as to do a lot of the things that European countries are doing. Even like free community college, if we don't want to do 4 years, but at least give people the ability to go to like 2-year community college
Mhm.
and have some type of a degree or vocational school.
Yeah.
We can do it. We definitely, I think we have the money somewhere in our budget to do it, but we just don't give it a priority,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I
So
know. I'm with you there. We need to prioritize the everyday American, the struggles that the everyday American has to deal with, and things like that. Education, how much of insurance is a scam, car
yes,
insurance
yes.
and
And
everything.
unfortunately, immigration gets treated as like a scapegoat, but in reality, like I was looking at the thing where they said how immigrants pay something like 92 billion in taxes, and they don't even get the benefits of it, because many
Mhm.
of the undocumented immigrants, they don't get health care, they don't get a lot of things that most people get. They don't get social security benefits.
Income tax, yeah, no
They don't
income tax
they
back,
don't get
yeah.
none of that, none of the money
Mhm.
back, but they pay it because they want to show that they're a good citizen, because they're hoping that maybe one day I can fix my status and I can show that I've been paying taxes all these years, which,
Exactly.
that can help in the future if you do fix your status. They do like seeing that when I go to those adjustment of status interviews, like, oh, you paid taxes for the last 10 years. So it is a plus, but a lot of them don't get the benefit,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So my dream is eventually for there to be like an amnesty or some type of thing like they had in
Yes.
the 80s with the
Yeah,
Reagan administration.
Reagan.
Yeah, he did
Yes,
the
yes.
amnesty, and that he really did it because of the companies, a lot of companies were not paying taxes because they were paying people off the books. So by doing this, he actually forced a lot of companies to have to pay like payroll taxes, because now you had all these people that suddenly had status. But it benefited a lot of people. It benefited a lot of people. So I know people
Yes.
personally who got status through that Reagan
That's
era.
amazing. Yeah, no, I wish that's my dream right now. If I had any kind of platform, that's what I would advocate for right now is amnesty, because I think that people don't fully understand how in the shadows immigrants have to live. They have to do everything, and in a country that's foreign to them. They don't speak the language. I was telling you the other day, it's hard enough for us who speak the language to
Yeah.
fill out some of these forms, much less, or understand what's being asked, and much less, somebody who doesn't speak the language. And so
Or
I
how
think
difficult it is to win a case. Like,
exactly.
because I was watching a story on the news about a little town in Montana, that Montana was voted, red, and the people all were rising up because ICE came and arrested this man who was kind of a pillar of the community. He was a father of four, and he had fled Mexico because he didn't want to join the cartels, and the cartels said they were going to kill him. So he fled Mexico, came to the United States. He was deported, and then he came back because I think he had kids here. So he had kind of been living like keeping a low profile because he had a wife and four kids. And then ICE came and picked him up, and the whole town rose up. Like, they were doing like potlucks and selling stuff to get money to pay for a lawyer to get him out of jail. And it was really great to see, because you saw all these people that were maybe against immigration, and they said, well, I didn't think it was going to affect my community, and this guy's such a good guy, and like, there really should be a path to citizenship. There really should be a way. And people are like, well, how is there no way to, and I'm like, you don't understand. It is
Exactly.
so hard to win an asylum case. It's so hard to, like, and the fact that the cartels are trying to kill you because you don't want to join, because you don't want to be a criminal. They
Exactly.
say, well, that sounds like a personal problem. Someone like that is not going to be able to win an asylum case because they can't show that it's political persecution.
And amnesty would help everybody else who doesn't fall under asylum or, any of these other visas that you can get. I mean, I think the only other one that maybe you can, if you came in, say in the 1990s after, Reagan, and amnesty was done, is maybe a U visa, right?
Yeah.
Possibly VAWA, maybe, but family petitions, maybe. But for people who don't qualify for any of those, they have to live their lives in the shadows and hope that one day, they can rejoin society and, open things up in their names. For a lot of those people, they rely on their citizen-born children to, have things in their names and translate things. And it's hard. I think if more people knew, what it was like, I do think that amnesty would be pushed, because it just seems like it's the most logical, way to do things right and do right by the people who, don't have criminal records and are here just to escape a life of poverty and persecution and to work, and just live normal lives.
And the laws have changed. They've gotten much harder. For example, I was talking to my aunt, because my family came on my mother's side. My mother's side is Haitian, and my grandmother came in the 60s from Haiti. And so all my aunts and uncles were here since the 60s, 70s, 80s. They've been here, and they're all like, well, how can you be here so long and you haven't been able to fix your status? And I told my aunt, I'm like, Auntie, it's not the way it used to be. Because back in the day, like, if you had a child that was born in the United States, you could get citizenship through your child. And that was something that was changed years ago. So now, like, I tell people that, because people still believe in that myth, and they'll say, well, I have a US citizen child, can I get status? Like, no, they changed that a long time ago. You have to wait until your child is 21 before your child can even petition for you. And the attitude that they have now is that you can be deported and go back to your country with your child or without your child. Like, you can leave your child and go back, we don't care. But that child is not going to be able to give you citizenship until they turn 21. And it's like a whole process of whether you entered legally or illegally. That's a whole nother story. So it's not that easy. So even my family, they're like, well, how can people not fix their status? Because back in the day, when they came in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it was much easier. You could probably do that if you married a US citizen, you have US citizen children. you could get citizenship through your family, and now it's not that easy. They don't care.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
don't
no, it's
care.
hard. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, I was talking to somebody who they entered, obviously illegally, and they waited for their children to turn 21, and come to find out that they couldn't because they had been deported once. They had been deported, and so it was like they were barred, from having their child petitioned to them, and it was like the biggest shock. They're like, I waited all this time,
Mhm.
and kind of put my eggs in that one basket and stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard. That's for sure.
I'm so glad to have this conversation with you, and you're able to like give this information to the community, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about, it might seem like common knowledge to you and me as immigration attorneys, but a lot of people don't know that. Like what you just said about that person who's barred 100%. A lot of people don't know that they could be barred. So that's why, again, you need a lawyer. You need an immigration lawyer. I'm not saying this because I'm an immigration lawyer, but really, don't try this at home. Don't try to do stuff by yourself, because people try to do stuff by themselves and then it gets rejected. And the worst part is the government will keep your money. They will reject your case
Mhm.
and keep your money. They do not care.
Yep.
But anyway, thank you so much, Marleni. So for this is our first live.
Woo!
Woo!
No,
I'm so
thank you
excited
for
for it.
having me. I had so much fun. I had so much fun.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having, and we were live today on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And then later we'll try to cut this up and give some more information to the community. All right. Bye everybody. Bye.
Bye.